Hi everyone, it's MiGHTYMAX from Team Endpoint, and today I'll be showing you how to defend top middle on Inferno with CT side. So to begin with, we'll start with long, primarily the AWP position. Now some things to consider here, mainly your fallback path, because when the T's come middle, obviously from these sort of angles here, to get away, the quickest way is for CT spawn, and the second one is through the mini pit, right? Before that, it's important to know how to play long and how to expect T's to come to your position. So when it comes with the long player, there's only a couple of things you can really do. The simplest one is a flash play for middle. Now with this, you need a teammate, obviously, and you tell them to stand by this roof, listening for any audio cues. And then when they hear the T's coming, or the mid take coming in, then from long, you can throw one of these flashes here. It's important that you don't expose yourself, because there's a chance that the info is wrong, or that maybe they peek without making noise. So I always hide, aim at the aerial here, flash, and then what you'll find is that it's a nice little flash here for middle. Teammate won't get blind, and you can peek and kill them as they set up for a mid take. So that's one thing you can do to find a kill on middle from long. The second thing is knowing the angles, especially if you're AWPing, because the most common angle here is long for this angle with the AWP. Secondary angles would probably be this trash corner here, where you can maybe dodge a flashbang, although against good opponents it's unlikely that you're going to dodge anything. And then the third and fourth ones being in the archway. The good thing about this is there's a chance that you can dodge a flash. You can actually sit anti-flash, wait and expect for a flash, and then peek and kill. And then you have towards mini pit here in library, where it's the same idea. You can dodge, you can hold. If you expect a flash, you can play anti-flash. The nice thing about library is it's pretty hard to flash if you're right at the back here, because the flash typically goes over this roof. If you play at the back here, you stand on the furniture at the back here, it's really hard for the T's to flash you. So it's a nice angle to play quite passive on long. But when it comes to actively defending middle, the one thing you don't want to do is try and defend on your own. You want to try and involve your teammates as much as possible, because typically when the T's come middle, it's going to be 3 or 4 guys, maybe even 5 guys. And if you're only one person holding, it can be tricky and you might get overwhelmed. So when it comes to defending top mid, something that I like to do is think about where I position my nades. Now what I mean by this is, particularly Molotovs, what I see a lot of people do often is they molly to block middle in this choke point here. Now this is from short or from long, so like so. And now the issue I have with this molly is, of course it does the job, right? But if the T's want to bypass it and come through, what you'll find is they'll smoke long or they smoke short, and then for them to come through, they just smoke the molly and they can see instantly. Now this is without obviously showing the flashes that are going off, the pop flashes, etc. But you know, this fight here for them is a lot easier than, say, if you molly just in front of the choke point, like so. Now, when they want to commit to middle, they have to smoke the molly like so, and then all of a sudden it's a much bigger smoke for them to bypass through, right? So when you're running through, if you want to go long, you end up in the bracket here. If you want to peek short, obviously it's a bit tricky. Obviously this smoke here's got a little one way. If you want to just peek towards long, obviously you can't see anything, so they have to come through a smoke, which gives you an advantage. So that's one small little trick. Another alternative to defending middle is just with utility damage. So something that you need to coordinate with your teammates from spawn. And what you want to do is you want to ask for your teammates on A to drop their grenades on long here, roughly in this area. Some people even drop it in the archway. But the idea is that when you're playing against a slow T side that, you know, come mid on some mid-round timing, that you can actually get quite a lot of utility damage with your HE nades here in middle. So as an example, when the T's come up middle and they molly under short, something like this, then what will happen is the T's will sort of congregate in this area here. And if you're fortunate enough with your timing, and obviously just chain one nade, pick up a second, for another nade, for a third nade, right? And then what that does is obviously deter the T's from coming up. But secondly, if they do get caught here, 3 HE nades is a lot of damage, and then obviously you can get a kill, get a lot of HP off them to make it easier for you to kill in the late round, and obviously you make them a bit scared of taking middle. When it comes to long defense, not so much top middle, the two main scenarios you face is the archway and library smokes, and then obviously the split smoke in the middle here. Now when playing against these explosive long takes, it can be really tricky to defend it up front, like from this position here. So if you think that these takes will happen against you, then obviously it's important that you save some utility, or you have an escape plan ready. And what I mean by having utility ready is, let's say you're AWPing long, and then all of a sudden you get pop flashed on middle, and you're running back, and these smokes start deploying, you're in some trouble, right? Because when they smoke archway and long, typically they're going to be coming up long with extra flashes. So what I like to do when I get blind here is I typically have a smoke or a molly ready. And the other thing as well is you often see the smokes flying through the air. So when you see this, obviously if you see the smokes first, then you can just block long with a smoke like so, right, or a Molotov. And then all of a sudden their long take they wanted to do, they have to commit for an extra smoke where maybe they don't have that flash ready, and it gives you some free kills there. The second thing is, if you don't have any utility and you're up against a long smoke and you start seeing maybe a split smoke come in around here, you have kind of 2 options. You can either block it if you have utility, or if you don't, you want to fall back and you want to try and reposition to an angle that's favorable for you, because if you stay out in the open here, sure, you might get 1 kill, but you're probably going to get instantly traded as you're going to be blinded by a pop flash. So what I like to do here is it depends a lot on the setup your team has, because let's say you have banana control, it doesn't make much sense going to CT spawn because you have all this information here on banana already that the T's aren't here, right? So if I know that we have banana control, then often I'll rotate more towards library and mini pit just because it keeps you strong on A and you don't need that early rotate to B. And also your B rotation, assuming banana is clear, can come into CT spawn and hold archway here, right? So it makes sense rather than being two guys stuck by this little pillar here. So that's one thing to consider, is the rotation. And the last thing to consider is obviously communication, right? If you lose mid control, you need to tell everyone on the team that you've lost mid control, right? Because this can impact how you may rotate, what info you get, and how your defense looks on A. And the second thing is when you lose long control, it's equally as important, if not more, to indicate that you've lost this long control, because your teammates on A may be set up for an apps pop, maybe setting up for a short pop, defending the site, doubling up wherever they are. And then if you don't communicate that you've lost long, there's a chance that when the T's come around long, that your teammates are exposed on balcony, maybe behind default, maybe they're peeking graveyard and they don't expect long. So this is why communication is so important on the CT side. When it comes to establishing long control, there's a couple ways you can do it. Obviously, you can always ask for a flashbang. Let's say you get pushed back to mini pit here and you're stuck behind a split smoke, right? You can make a play here if you have any utility, or you can just jump through a smoke with a flash by asking your pit player or your site player to flash for you. What you can do with this is you can bring your B rotation player into it as well. Let's say you have a Molotov and they just thrown a split smoke, coordinate with your B rotation who's coming from B to then come archway, right? So if he's holding this line, he's holding the cross to you, and then you can be ready with a play as soon as he gets contact, right? Flash and come through and kill. Or maybe you want to retake it, so it's more doubling up together, right? Let's say you do get pushed into double CT spawn. It's a really awkward position to be in because you don't have much information here, and also you're out of the fight if they come to A or to B. So what you can do here is double up, ask for a flash, and peek. Okay, so now we're going to talk about playing middle from short. Now it's kind of a different role, or there's a lot of similarities. It's very difficult again to fight on your own from short, but you can also bring teammates in to help you for mid setups, to hold middle, to do flash plays, to play in apps, these sort of things. So what you'll see quite commonly, a lot of top tier players, is that they throw this second mid balcony molo. Now obviously there's lots of different lineups, but this is the one that I know. And what this does is it helps you add a layer of defense to your mid take, because it delays this apps control from this spoiler player here. Now this might force them into a faster mid take, or it might slow them down even more, right? Typically if it's a faster mid take, they're more likely to be grouped in this choke point. Or if it's a slower one, maybe you'll be able to have more information in the late round on how many people are actually taking mid, right? Because again, if you're 1v4 on middle, you don't really want to hold it on your own. But one mid setup that's quite common is for a player to be boosted onto the roof. A quick way to do this is for your teammate to stand here. You can just bunny hop off this barrel onto the roof, right? And you just play anti-flash. Or you can play down here in anti-flash, or you can even jump onto the little wall here. Now with one player up here, you'll play one guy underneath. Now this guy is quite important that he has a smoke, because again with mid takes, utility is quite important, and the T's will often molly deep, and they'll often molly under the roof, right? So you want to have a smoke to put one of these out. And typically the third player is kind of fills. Sometimes you have an AWP holding under the pillar here, in which case the rifle here would hold apps. Or if you have just 3 rifles, often what would be the case is you have a guy on the floor, a guy on top, and a guy holding apps. This way you're quite strong, all angles. You're not isolated in your fights. So that's one mid setup. When it comes to finding information and sort of delaying middle, the same things apply here on short. It's a little bit harder to do, because the angles that you have to peek here, what we call left eye peek, which means if an AWP is holding you, as an example, you have literally no advantage whatsoever. But it's also the same for the T's, right? When they peek, it's left eye peek here, left eye peek here. So when it comes to gathering information mid-round, it's better to bring your teammates to retake some information or get some sort of support utility. One of the classic things to do is ask for a flash, and what you can do from your pit player is you just ask for this flash here. You can just peek around the corner, peek boiler, or peek more committed around middle. If there's 2 of you here, you can peek more committed, or maybe you're going to communicate with your long player to set up some sort of mid retake and just find some quick information. With this mid setup, the reason why you want to save your smoke quite often, if you're playing under the roof, is that when the molly comes in like so, there's a way you can actually just left click a smoke, and you have a really sick one way here to kill them when they come out middle. And it's really difficult, the T's, to see you if you get quite lucky and you hit a perfect one way. In a scenario where the T's take middle, they smoke long, they molly deep short, and you've fallen back, obviously this is the point where you have to have an idea of where you're going to go and what you're going to say, right? So obviously the first things first is that you've lost mid control. So this has to be relayed to your long player, to your B players, and obviously your apps player. So once this has been done, the safest route from short is probably back onto the site, right? Because if you run here, there's a chance they peek behind the molly, etc. But obviously, if you have the time to do this, you can do it. Now, when it comes to sort of defending from this area, it's pretty good to always try and double up with your pit player. So whether this is, balcony and apps, maybe it's double pit, maybe it's graveyard and apps. These are some really strong setups and crossfires to have, or even double site to play back site and front site on. So that's something to consider for mid and late round. But if you get pushed into a position where you're one pit, one site, it's not the end of the world, right? There's always things you can do. For example, if you have your smoke, you can smoke end of apps off and reposition, or you can even, smoke aggressive onto short, put some doubt in the T's mind. Maybe you could be boosting behind this, right? You're making a play, retaking some control middle, boosting up on this wall, clearing middle, these sort of things, right? It's something to consider. Or if you have a lot of utility, just saying, okay, we're happy on A, we don't need mid control, we can play with our smokes, our mollies, whatever it is, right? When you play A without long control, obviously you're very limited in what you can do because you have a lot of angles exposed, some crossfires become more difficult, and it's another angle to consider when you're defending, right? So typically when long is exposed and they can come through the mini pit, double pit is a really good setup because you can obviously hold a headshot angle, which is obviously favors the CTs. Also, doubling sight is not too bad, but you have to have smokes available to you so that if you're up against a long wrap, as we like to call it, when the T's are splitting A through long, through apps, through short, then obviously you want to try and deny one of them, right? Which often is the case. You can actually smoke off mini pit like so. And of course, it's not going to really stop them, but it gives you some fighting advantage when they have to come through a smoke, right? So that's something to consider as well. When long is open, you want to limit the angles you're fighting or control the angles that you are fighting. So this is why headshot is a perfect example. Pit's a perfect example because you can control the short fight, the long fight, you can even peek long. Graveyard is a tricky one because the second you peek, you're exposed to multiple angles. Obviously, common one is to peek up, but as you can see, short, apps, and long. If you peek down, obviously you limit it a little bit, but it's still apps and short. Approaching A as a retake. Now, this is a tricky one because any retake you do, you should always consider the money that your team has and also the advantage your team has in terms of numbers, right? So let's say it's a 3-on-3, and if you lose the round, you're eco for 2 rounds, then there's an argument that you probably shouldn't go for the retake, right? But let's say you're 12-0 up, your economy's flowing, it's a 4-on-3, even a 3-on-3 at that point, you can go for these sort of things. But the most common utility that I use, and I think a lot of people use, is this backside smoke. Now what you can do, you line up on the window. I aim above the window here as well. Now what this smoke will do is it gives you some cover, first of all, from hit and headshot to walk onto the site. The second thing is you can peek above the box here and clear any angles, and you can also jump up and isolate one-on-one fighters. Now this is extremely strong with a backside Molotov, which burns out corners here, so you don't have to hard check them. The way I do this, again in the window, I go up from this little patch here to the line, I do a jump forward through. So if you compare them both here, obviously Molotov out the backside, right? So when you come through, you can already pre-aim towards the middle site. So that's the most common utility when retaking from long. But obviously there are other things you can do as well, such as mollying the bike and pit. And the way I do this is I can just jump check over the smoke if it's smoked, or I just aim for this line here on the fly pit mollo. But yeah, there's not really too much other retake utility here.